My name is Philip J. Wolf, and I'm the chair of this meeting. Can you hear me now? No? Are the mics working? It's supposed to be. Okay, does that work?
And the people in the back here?
Okay, apologize for that. My name is Philip J. Wolf. I'm the chair of the COAB Executive Committee, and I'm a voting member of COAB. And I'm also a voting member of the Accountability Subcommittee. Tonight is our first COAB meeting that's really run by COAB, not by the city. And so I'm really happy everyone's here tonight. It's really important to have your participation, and I very much want your feedback and input on our report on what we're bringing next month in front of Judge Simon. So now for the agenda, I will go look at that. You guys know where the bathrooms are, where the exits are, around back here. So I'd like to start with Tom's discussions that you've brought tonight, Tom.
I want to put on. We have to push this thing here. The middle one.
Is it on now?
Yeah.
Okay, I want to put this gathering in perspective. On August 19th, the DOJ and the city decided to put the COAB in recess, meaning we cannot have any public meetings and we do not get administrative support, the exception being for the work related to this, what has been described as a work session. So there's nothing we do during this time period of the 60-day recess that is official COAB business, because we're not permitted to do that by the DOJ and the city. The COAB informally has protested. I say informally because we can't vote, because we can't meet. But informally, we've protested the recess. We think we should be working and trying to reform the Portland Police Bureau. Nonetheless, Philip and I met with the city attorney, Judy Prosper, and some others, as have other COAB people from time to time over the last few weeks. In our meeting, there was a suggestion or a request that we work on the report, a report to Judge Simon on October 25th at the status conference. Last year, same time frame in August or October, the COAB presented a report that had been approved by the COAB. Frankly, this year we can't present a report approved by the COAB because we're not allowed to meet. So at best, we can submit a report providing information that, with some semblance of consensus by the COAB members, individually as opposed to the formal COAB, can agree to. Philip and I, when asked by the city to work on such a report, agreed that we should not do that without getting community input, like we always do on things. So that's the reason for this work session, at least I think the primary reason for the work session. It looks like tonight there are 4 of the 8 remaining COAB members here for whatever reasons. Let me say just a brief word about that. The city has a responsibility with the DOJ's oversight to staff the COAB, and it has failed to do so. And so instead of having 15 members, we're down to 8. The bare minimum for a quorum, the bare minimum to pass recommendations, the bare minimum to approve a report to the judge. We've informally complained about that. but here we sit, the four of us. So what can I say? I think the 8 of us, even those not in attendance, are still committed to police reform and committed to the COAB. But the reality is, the city has essentially abandoned us and put us in disarray.
And the community.
And the community, with disrespect to the community, because by not allowing us to meet, not allowing us to pass recommendations, and not allowing us to formally present a report to the COAB, we're left with what we are here. Having said that, I think the report that we can make to the judge is important. My perspective on the meeting tonight, this gathering tonight, and it's just my perspective, it may not be correct, is that the most important thing that we need tonight is input from the community if there are issues or matters that you think we should be reporting to the judge related to the COAB, the settlement agreement, whatever related to our existence and operation. The COAB, again informally, for the most part because we're not allowed to meet, have prepared a number of recommendations about things that need to change to save the COAB and improve the settlement agreement, and improve oversight, and improve potential reform. But we would like additional input from the community.
And that's like, sorry. And I think that number is, correct me if I'm wrong, is right around the mid-40s to mid-50s in terms of the recommendations that have effectively fallen to the wayside because the city has forced the COAB into recess. Is that right? Between 40 and 50, and that's for the 55.
There are over 50 some recommendations in terms of reform, police reform, that we've approved as a COAB, and those are sitting out there. But yeah. The other another issue I think that we need to think about tonight is sort of the process for putting together this report. I have already begun to draft a report and am happy to assume some responsibility for continue to do that. And again, given the informality of the situation we're in, I assume that will probably just be circulated among COAB members, and we will reach some kind of consensus as best we can on what to tell the judge. But again, we need to hear from people if they have particular thoughts or insights that they would like to see us be reporting to the judge. That's sort of my take on what we're about tonight.
Thank you, Tom. I'd like to share my thoughts on that because firstly, I'm chair of the executive committee, so it's my duty to report, but English is not my first language. ASL is my first language, English is my second. So doing that, typing up the report and using formal language and correct grammatical structure, all of that, I really need everyone's feedback on that. And then I can move that forward. But I feel like it would be very powerful for a deaf person to give that report and really show that to the judge. I did a rough draft of an introduction and some topics that we want to do, but really the content of it that we want to discuss in the report, that's what we're here tonight to do. You gather all of your feedback and your input and work together on this to figure out what we want to say in that report. So is there anyone who would like to make a comment now? Anyone who'd like to share on the report?
Can I interrupt for a second? Sorry. I think that's me. You can hear me, I think. I shouldn't tell you if you can hear me or not. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I just want to let everyone know that Maria Medina, a COAB member, is actually participating remotely, so she's watching the live stream, and she'll text me any comments, just so you know.
Thank you.
And I would suggest if somebody wants to speak, they come up here at the table and get a microphone if there's something they want to suggest or add.
And I think, Dan, you always have something to say, right? I mean, yes, there you are.
Good evening. Hi, I'm Dan Handelman with Portland Cop Watch, and we didn't prepare anything for tonight because I actually, seeing the agenda, thought that there was going to be more of your draft report for us to respond or add to. I'm trying to look through the one that you did last year that you gave to the judge, and I think that it would be very helpful if you maybe kind of go out over a broad outline of what that was, kind of the kind of paragraphs that you focused on, and to if you're going to try to get more meaningful input from the rest of us. Obviously, one of the main things the judge needs to hear is the city's non-compliance with the settlement agreement by failing to fill the empty seats on your board. You would be functioning, you would have been able to finish your recommendations about the oversight system that we have if you hadn't been cut off at the knees, so to speak, at the point where you were getting ready to vote on that. I don't know if that's a coincidence or if that was deliberate to stop your recommendations from going forward, but you may know that that entire process is now on hold because enough community members came out and said that their proposals were not strong enough and they hadn't had enough community input. And a number of people, I think, referenced the COAB Accountability Subcommittee's report in their testimony. So I think the judge needs to hear all that too, that your role in making this city a better place to live and improving our police bureau and our oversight systems is crucial. There's no other city that had the same kind of mechanism put in with the DOJ agreement. And Seattle has something mildly similar, but nothing exactly like what you guys have for us. And that from the beginning, it's been separated out. Oh, the Citizen Review Committee is over here, Training Advisory Council is over here, Community Police Relations Committee is over here. I think there's been confusion, and a number of those other bodies have fallen into disarray as well. And I'm not sure what's going on with the Commission on Disabilities, Chair Wolf, but I would note that the PCOD and the Human Rights Commission have an open seat on this board they could fill, and the HRC has a seat on this board they could fill. So you would have 10 members if those two groups did that. So I think that's a very important thing to think about in terms of getting this group back up and running. As for the rest of the presentation to the judge, it's very hard for you to assess how far the police have gone in making changes to their policies because we've only seen one policy come back from them that's in this packet, the one about mental health. And I have not gone through it line by line. I don't know if you have to see whether any of the COAB recommendations made it in there. We at Portland Cop Watch have made over 100 recommendations to them about their policies, and by going through the ones that they published, I've only seen about 3 or 4 of our recommendations that have showed up, and they're mostly typographical errors that we found, which is very frustrating. If they want community input, they should, first of all, explain why they didn't take the suggestions that we made if they rejected them, and second of all, they should let us see each other's recommendations so we can build on each other and we know what people have been saying. So it would be great if your recommendations, I think they're all on the website somewhere, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I think it would be good for you to bring a packet of those to Judge Simon so we can see the length, width, and breadth of all the things you've recommended and the emptiness of what, the crickets that you got in terms of response. It's also still not clear to me who's supposed to be responding to that. It's supposed to be the DOJ, the COCL. The COCL said they were going to pass your recommendations straight on to the Bureau. The Bureau, you don't even know who's supposed to be working with.
Well, I think it's pretty clear in the settlement agreement, and given what the COCL has been saying, is they want out from chairing us, which we join in that request, and they only see their role as basically monitoring and trying to improve metrics in terms of data and measurements. They are not policy people. They are not giving us advice. They are not weighing in on our recommendations. At least they haven't so far. not a single recommendation that they ever commented on. So their role is limited to trying to improve data collection systems and then commenting on what the data suggests is good or bad about the police bureau. That's my take on what they're doing, and nothing more.
That said, again, frustrating because they've put you on hold. The COCL is supposed to come out with their next semi-annual report next week, I believe. And you are obligated under the settlement agreement to review it. So we, the community, need you to do that. And you have, like I said, I would like to see those 2 seats filled. I know what the Human Rights Commission is doing. They met for the first time in 4 months on September 7th, but they didn't assign anybody to this body. But we need to have public hearings about that. And the COCL still has a responsibility to this group to present those reports to you. I would also suggest that as we're looking at the changes that might be made to the settlement agreement, that you be allowed to comment on the outcomes reports as well, because that's just as important, if not more important, than the compliance reports. I'll probably have more thoughts later. I hope it's okay to speak more than once.
Live. All right. I'm well. I hope you all are well. My name is Charles Johnson, and Mr. Handelman touched on most of my concerns. I do think that very soon I don't know. There's it's difficult for you to have a process to, in this 3-week interim, kind of put working documents out there. But I don't know. There's some activity on Facebook. Mr. Steenson will join us on Facebook, but who knows what could show up on. But there's some kind of COAB committee has a page on Facebook. I don't know how it got there.
That would be the accountability.
Yeah.
Right? And then general.
Yeah. And my point is that it would be, I think, appropriate, although I'm sure others will dissent, to circulate either a draft copy of the report or a preliminary letter. I haven't really heard specifically from y'all that you are going to explicitly inform the judge that under any reasonable legal standard, the city is in violation, even though it has a written agreement or a written interaction with the United States Department of Justice. The city is failing to comply with what it agreed to comply with, or proceed in the manner it agreed to proceed. And I don't know how privy y'all were to, I think an official Ninth Circuit mediator had to help the city when the city said, "No, Judge Simon, we don't think you have that authority." And lo and behold, I think an official authorized Ninth Circuit mediator got involved, and understanding happened, and status conferences continue. So, and actually, I think that, even though it's not specifically related to the COAB work, I think that it's an informative public context. We need to be reminded that the city has not always embraced even its own proposed changes. It hasn't really done them. The other thing I think that is appropriate, regardless of any specific authorizing language, is you are a community oversight advisory board, and most of the discussion has talked about your interaction with the community, a two-way interaction, bringing information to the community and taking it back. And I think that it's appropriate for you to explicitly, or at least tacitly, get written community input. It's a very bizarre situation that the Albino Ministerial Alliance Coalition for Justice and Police Reform, or maybe the whole AMA, is a special amicus status on a settlement agreement that's about mental health. So I hope that Jason Rimbaud or others, that what you submit to the court could include really anything that the public wants to submit to you in writing or by other means. It's very common in federal court to have video and audio testimony. And so I think it would be appropriate for the 2016 COAB submission to include letters from individuals and organizations that have concerns, congratulations, fears, etc. Thank you. Certainly.
I have a question, Charles. I just want to make sure that I understood you correctly. So you're suggesting that the COAB includes written reflections from the community as well as different formats, that being media or audio recording, right?
Yeah, Judge Simon has a very busy calendar, so we don't really know, even though some people have been quite assertive about engaging with his professional staff, such as Mary Ang. I'm on.
Okay.
So some people, like
actually, it's just the microphone.
Mary Ang has been very communicative with Judge Simon's staff.
Okay.
Other people don't know, but I think that it's appropriate if we're trying to maintain an environment that shows eagerness and willingness to reduce police harm, that you be open to anything. If a victim of, for example, I think it's almost essential that Judge Simon know that during the city's supposed diligence in this, the CRC conducted psychological and emotional torture against an epileptic person by allowing the police department to play fast and loose with policy procedures. It's bizarre. My personal interaction with the CRC is not so bad, but to see the shenanigans of Bob West's camera grabbed, and then the final CRC outcome says, we find this activity to be unreasonable and or unprofessional, and the day before it's going to be officially put before the city council, the acting chief of police says, oh, wait, we've done something, so it can't go in front of the city council. So there's really, and when you look at the activity of police oversight, it could be really well argued that there's no good faith. A man who was tased, has epilepsy, his procedure took forever. He provided the CRC with the right documents, but Ellen Osenach, I think, or whoever was advising Judy Prosper, I don't know which, they side, there's still evidence to present to Judge Simon that the city constantly sides only with the police department, which actually is bad policy because it opens the city up to further legal liability. Instead of the police department of the city being seen as clearly advocating for reduced harm, it prefers to create bureaucratic nightmares for people who have been victims of police violence.
Thank you, Charles, for sharing. And I do want to add to your comments, I agree that the city is not within compliance and that the city is the one who has been doing the oversight and they haven't been in compliance themselves. And that's an issue. So thank you. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you all.
Hi, Philip. Thank you. Pat Adams, concerned citizen. As I observe this, I think to myself that maybe to step back. Right, to maybe step back and look at what is it that we need for this process to work. And there's two things that come to me. One is training in group process, and the other is that if this is a mental health focus that we, or at least the COAB, should get some training in their own mental health. So for instance, on the group process, it seems to me like with the COCO and the city and the Portland Police Bureau and so forth, that again, we need family counseling here. We're not talking, there's no process that says how do we come together, how do we talk, what do we agree on, what do we disagree on?
So Pat, are you, I'm trying to narrow this down. So could you quite possibly be talking about something like family group decision making, where everybody comes in, they have a specific process or guidelines or conduct guideline? Can you?
The COAB is one group, and then the COAB as a group is in a group with the city and the Portland Police and the community. And I believe there's some basic fundamental processes that groups go through, right? Storming, forming, norming, performing. I don't think this is new science, and yet no one's looking at it from that standpoint, saying, what's happening with this group? Why aren't we coming together? Admittedly, this is a task that has been tackled successfully nowhere. So it's extremely difficult, but the different entities need help. Secondly, to my observation, is the mental health issue, is that's again, the COAB was assigned to deal with mental health issues with people in crisis, and people show up to the mental health group and this in crisis. Duh.
There's no process for care.
Right. There's no process for the care of that person. There's no process for the care of the people on the COAB. And people in crisis generally cause other people to go into crisis. And so there's yelling and screaming, and then nobody's been trained about how to do that, how to prevent my own crisis from coming up and making this big conflict. I saw Rochelle during one of those conflicts. She stood up, she walked over, she stood peacefully and strongly between the two people, and she presented that presence, right? It's like, right. But who else knows how to deal with that? And so what I really see is that this board has been thrown into a situation for which it is not prepared.
I am wondering how we can incorporate the comments you just made into the report, or how you would want those incorporated. I understand what you're saying, but I'm just wondering, I just want to make sure that your concerns are represented and get documented when we report to Judge Simon.
So can I interrupt for a second? So I'm going to ask a specific question here. So what I envision when you're talking, or about what you're talking about, Pat, is basically to have trauma-informed care teams, people who are aware and trained in compassionate witnessing, people who are able to take in a highly scripted way to deal with these just highly intense and highly energetic moments, no matter who they are in the community, because we're all one community. Is that basically what you mean, or is there more or less? Or
I like that a lot. Trauma-informed care is appropriate for people who come here in trauma, because this is the place they should come, right? And for COAB members who themselves have been through lots of trauma in their lives, as many have, to help them as well. And in my personal opinion, it is also for police officers. Any officer who inappropriately uses violence against a citizen, to me, is in trauma, and they need trauma-informed care. We all need trauma-informed care. It's not just the people that get arrested and all the way.
so that would include direct, secondary, and vicarious trauma. a response to that.
Boy, you sure stepped way beyond my knowledge there.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry.
All right. And the other thing is, as far as Judge Simon, I don't know if in the family dynamic area that he's dad, right? Okay, Dad, you got to get these guys, the kids together. Do you have that authority? But you can't just listen to complaints while we point fingers at each other. It won't work.
I want to respond to that briefly. In a very probably cynical way, unfortunately, the settlement agreement that was reached between the DOJ and the city explicitly excludes the judge from having any authority to actually do anything. All that he can do is conduct these annual status conferences, hear from the parties, the COCO, the police union, the COAB, and the Bound Ministerial Alliance and Coalition for Justice and Police Reform. But he has no authority to actually act on what he hears. And in my opinion, it's a stacked deck against us in that sense. I still think it's important to let him know and let the public know what we think. But unfortunately, he really has no authority to say to the city or the DOJ, you need to do something different. Can he suggest something? Maybe, hopefully. But he under the current agreement, he has no authority. All he can do is resolve disputes if brought to him by the DOJ or the city, the parties to the agreement.
Can I ask a question? Can I ask a question about that? Let's get the letter off and then just read and then threaten your response. Well, now I'll tell you what. Hit it once again. Okay, now hit it once again. And when it's all ready, you are. Okay, can I ask a question about that?
Of course.
Okay. So my understanding was that the judge could not intervene in handling this little matter or that little matter, but that he did have authority to end the whole settlement agreement. Is that not true, or can you comment? Thank you.
Well, under the law, when he's presented with a settlement agreement as the city and the DOJ presented, he has to conduct a fairness hearing to determine whether, on some overall basis, the settlement is fair. And he did that a couple years ago, had that hearing, and determined that the settlement agreement is fair. I suppose he could determine that the settlement agreement, based on further information, is no longer fair. I don't know that. I mean, that's an argument, I guess, that could be made. Yeah.
So, Tom, just to answer your question, what I would request then that say that to the judge that at least one citizen thinks that it's necessary that the parties be brought together in a mentally healthy environment to become the kind of group that can deal with these problems.
An observation I could report on that is that there were people in the mental health community that were approached prior to the selection of the COAB members to try and get people with mental health experience. I mean, people who were having issues with mental health to be involved in the COAB, and some of the people in the community advocates refused to recommend or get their people involved because they did not feel like the way this was set up was going to be safe and healthy, which is your point, I think, in hindsight, so to speak. And so what I think they were concerned about, I think some of us probably share your opinion about a need to address that problem.
Thank you.
You know, Pat, as you're walking away, one of the things while you all were talking that I had a flash, an insight. I think that Pat's points really can fall under the umbrella of social equity. And I'd like to, if it's okay with you guys, I'd like to write that part down and make those recommendations, because I do have some familiarity with what those processes look like and what would be required professionally. And if I don't, I mean, I'll be in contact with people in my professional field and in the community that might be able to add more breadth to those recommendations, because I think they're wise and healthy and caring, and they put forth a nonviolent message. So I appreciate that. That's okay with you all?
Thank you, V. And Tom, did you want to say anything? I don't know if any COAB members had gotten the email just today from Roger David Hardesty. If you guys got that email today, there was an added attachment to the email that really expounds on the CPR, the IPR, PPA, and many different groups and organizations asking us to consider incorporating that into the report. And I was wondering if maybe we wanted to take a moment to discuss that. It was in the email.
I have a copy of it here.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't know if Rochelle or Tom, I don't know what your schedules are like today. I looked at it briefly. It might be, if you guys are into it, either look at it tonight after a 15-minute break and review it really quickly and talk about it a little bit, but then the community hasn't had a chance to look at it. That's the only thing.
Right. That is true.
Perhaps we can get a copy of it, and I don't know, Mandy, if there's any way to make copies here tonight?
I'll see if I'll see.
Okay.
And then we can have everybody have a copy and look at it.
Okay.
I think personally, though, in my quick review of that email, that it was, in my opinion, a bit expansive. I think that our task is to write a status report of the COAB, and that might include some information in general about what's happening with police accountability in general in the city. But I don't think we have the information or it's our place to get involved in the inner workings of what's happening with IPR and CRC and CPRC and whatever. Yeah. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Well, I read through it. I read through the comments made, and I'll try to see if Mandy, maybe we can put it up on the screen. It'd be nice to provide everyone a copy as well. I can do a basic summary of it, though. I think it would be great if we could use some of the information from there to incorporate that into the report, possibly as an attachment, or do an appendix A, B, and C that you can refer back to that, because I think that Roger put out great information there, and I think it very much supports our concerns and our experiences and our frustrations with the city. And it's something that I'd like to put out there as an idea, and we have an opportunity tonight to talk about it. That's what I wanted to say. Tom?
in response to what Dan and I think both Charles asked about, was it'd be helpful, it would have been helpful if we had a draft together of a report that you could be reviewing and commenting on, and we didn't have that. So I have worked on a draft, and so maybe I can just sort of summarize what's in it, and it's based upon input we've received from other people on the COAB or I received, and so I think it's sort of the direction that we want to take, and it's not really different than what you've said. The first part sort of addresses, what the COAB has been doing, how it's been doing, and what its accomplishments are. And so, talking about the work we've tried to do with the community, the meetings we've had, the input we've received, the 50-some odd recommendations that we've developed and approved. There's another 40-some odd recommendations regarding accountability that are pending. The reality is, the COAB has spent an enormous amount of time and energy researching and developing and listening to the community and putting together recommendations. We also have spent time working on the community engagement plan with the police, which I'm not as well versed in, frankly, to talk about. Jimmy, who's not here tonight, has had the major role in working on that. So I think it's important to tell the judge what we've tried to do, and also make sure the judge understands that we've received virtually no response from the DOJ, except for a few recommendations regarding mental health. We've received no response from the city as to anything. Similarly, we have spent a considerable amount of time commenting on the COCO's work and the reports, and I think completely or almost completely our recommendations have been rejected by the COCO. So the reality is the work we've done, if it's influenced people, good, but we don't get any feedback, and that frustrates the COAB and it frustrates the community, and I think has led to some distrust by the community in the COAB, which I somewhat understand, because we're not seemingly getting much done. I mean, we're doing a lot of work, but it doesn't seem like it's accomplishing much. So the first portion is sort of, as I view it, is sort of recapping what we've done or tried to do, because I think it's actually pretty impressive, but I'm not sure it's done any ultimate good, but we've done a lot of work. The second area, which people have talked about and the COAB's talked about, has to do with what are the significant changes we think need to be made if the settlement agreement is going to work and if the COAB's going to have any chance of being successful. Because we're not allowed to meet, the COCO has refused to let us meet, and now the city and the DOJ refuses to let us meet. Some of what we've put together in terms of recommendations have been informal in terms of letters. There's been like 3 or 4 of those now over the last couple of months. There's been a couple recommendations approved at meetings. But they run the gamut from we should chair ourselves. It should not be a community organization chaired by the COCO. And actually the COCO agrees with that, and I think the city and probably the DOJ agrees that change has to occur, and I think it will. We should be independent of the city. I think the city's interested in having us no longer be quote-unquote public officials and subject to the public meetings law and the public records law, which will free us up to be truly independent. Not that we don't want to continue to meet publicly and act publicly, but that we aren't restrained by some of the laws that I think have prevented us from doing some work. Community outreach too, yeah. We think that when we've approved,
Well, and the court-appointed monitor as well. if you
right,
wanna talk on
we've
that.
approved a recommendation formally to have a court-appointed monitor in place for the reason that in other cities where the DOJ has gone in every city where they've gone in, there's been a court-appointed monitor, and in those cities, policy changes and training changes and those kinds of things have happened ballpark within a year, year and a half, and we're nowhere.
After a year and almost 2 years.
As far as we can tell, we're nowhere. I'm not saying that the Bureau hasn't changed some things, but in terms of changes to the use of force policy and those kinds of things, we're nowhere. And the monitor, who's court appointed, has a big stick, and we don't have much of a stick at all. And so,
And let's think about, I'm sorry to interrupt, let's think about that community survey that said some 80% of the police, quote unquote, rank and file officers in the streets, they don't believe the settlement agreement will have any impact. And that's due to...
No, that's an important point to mention that in the
Right.
report as well.
And that's due to...
Yeah,
due
totally
to the
agree. It's really important.
Right. And that's due to, I did a little bit of research, of course, and that's due to the sort of communication that happens in a command and control type of organization. It must come from the top down. Otherwise, the rank and file doesn't have, quote unquote, an opportunity to absorb those values. And if it's not consistently portrayed and communicated in a way that makes sense for the community, then the rank and file won't absorb it.
Right. Okay, two things that I would like to add to that that I was thinking about while we were talking. So I'd like to emphasize one big thing that we did, accomplishment that we had, was the BHU, establishing the BHU, Behavioral Health Unit. I think that'll be really important to get that across. And I was wondering how the report should look. What, if it should be a formal document with the presentation. Maybe we start with Tom doing an opening presentation and then I would do a closer for that, or the other way around. Would it just be me doing it the whole way through? What do people envision for that? I'd like to get an idea for what you have in mind so we can set that up to match what you're envisioning. Does anybody from the audience want to comment on that? Okay. I'm open. This is, yeah. As long as it's relative to the report, yes, it's open.
If I can just I'm sorry. Gary? I'm sorry, Mike.
I'll give you my analysis of what it's worth. First of all,
Hi, Mike.
Hi. First of all, it's what we don't talk about that. Oh, Mike Schumann, Portland Cop Watch. I can. Does that work? Okay, Mike Schumann, Portland Cop Watch. And I've got a couple of things to talk about. First of all is the city and the police union have been negotiating. They've been negotiating secretly. And the provisions of the union contract say that if an officer gets disciplined and he doesn't like the discipline, the officer can go to an arbitrator that's set up with a process that relies on what happened last time. And since nothing ever happens to the cops, they don't get disciplined. And the result of what you have is that the police chief, the mayor, the lieutenants, anybody doesn't have discipline over the police. The police individual officers can do pretty much what they want, and they can't get disciplined. I mean,
So unbridled discretionary
right.
power.
And what they're doing, what they did is they did a couple of things. They put you on hiatus. They secretly negotiated a union contract that keeps the same provisions. And they tried to rewrite the IPR and the CRC and to make the rules. Now, all of that has to come together somehow or other. If you're not going to get input into the union contract, nothing is ever going to change in this town. And somehow either the union contract has to have provision in it that says if an officer is found responsible by the IPR, that's it. He doesn't get to go, or she get to go and appeal it to the union arbitrator, and the arbitrator says, oh, no problem, let's put them back on the force, give them $500,000 or so, and everything will be just fine. So that's the system that you have now, and my question to you is you've got to figure out how to change that. And I asked the COCO, what are you going to do about that if you're going to try and change it? He never had an answer to it, and I asked him privately, and he still didn't have an answer to it, but he's not dealing with it.
But Mike, I mean, doesn't that really go to the laws? So long as the laws don't say, yeah, the police don't have, unbridled discretionary powers, that in fact if they do kill somebody or if they do commit some sort of transgression or infraction, or they commit a criminal act, that they can be subjected to the same sort of punitive responses as non-police officers.
Has that ever happened?
No.
It's not going to happen in the city of Portland.
So I guess what I'm saying is, the way I see it is paradigmatically we're constrained. Unless and until those laws change, there's little, if anything, that really the community can do but come together in a unified, to some degree, voice and say, the laws need to change. Hey, DA system, hey, district attorneys, this is where the change needs to happen. If the DAs don't want to do that, and we look at who's being impacted and the outcomes for those people, then it becomes a social equity problem.
The system is in the union contract. The union contract is negotiated by the city of Portland and the police union. Mm-hmm. And they put those provisions in the law. Now, if the union contract, for instance, said the IPR gets to decide all discipline regarding police abuse, they have the ability, and that there's no appeal, they have the ability to do that. They won't, because it's politically, they're going against the police. And they don't want to do that. But you can ask them to do all of those things. They don't have to just agree to keep the current system in place. And what they're doing is they put you on hiatus, kept the current police union contract in place, and negotiated and is redoing the IPR. And there's got to be something. Those are all things that are happening together, and I suspect for a reason. And if you don't deal with that, you're not doing anything. And somebody's got to go before council and go before somebody, the judge, whatever. You might get around just one off.
There you go.
And have that change. I mean, that's the change that we need.
Okay, so if I can pigtail on what Mike is saying, Tom and Philip, I would suggest that in looking and considering that the union contract or anything that has to do with the community having the ability to refer to and use specific metrics that indicate patterns or practices of certain types of behavior, that needs to happen. But I mean, here again, like you said, we're in a hiatus, and this is, I think it's one of the 55 recommendations that the accountability system put forth. But it's not in the but it's not in the PPA contract right now. They said, no, we can get rid of the 48-hour, but we don't have to take care of the use of force or the I'm drawing a blank, use of force or after action reports or something.
Is the union contract out? Is it actually published now? The proposed one? Okay. I haven't read it, and I'm not a labor lawyer, and I don't know what they can do and what they can't do. But I know that they can change those provisions if they choose to. And then I have one more comment that I'll give you my overall impression of what happened to the COAB. And what happened to the COAB is they were doing wonderful work. You were doing wonderful work, I thought. And you were going through the directives and changing them and trying to hold the police accountable. And then what happened is a series of people came to the meeting and were very disruptive. And for whatever reason, mostly because the COCO was running the meetings and not you, I suspect, but nobody could deal with that. And I think a lot of people at that point just threw up their hands and said, I'm not willing to deal with that. People resigned. The city gave up on the COAB. The COCO gave up on the COAB and vice versa. But you have to be able to run a meeting and not have people emoting all over you, or you're going to get where you are now. And I know Dan disagrees with me on that, but that's my 2 cents on it.
A couple of comments.
Did you have a comment?
Quick comments.
Go ahead, Katie.
The Accountability Subcommittee has not looked at the issue of the union contract and how to change that and can it be changed and alternatives to the ultimate problem with the disciplinary process currently, and that is that the arbitrators always side with the union. And there are a variety of reasons I've heard about that, and that is the union has good lawyers, the city has bad lawyers. Precedent counts, and since the city always loses, they continue to lose. There may also be a piece of state law about required arbitration, which I'm not sure about. The only suggestion that I've heard is the suggestion by Portland Cop Watch, and that is that the arbitrator should be taken out and the Civil Service Board, if I have the name correctly, should be the ultimate decision maker for police discipline. But I will tell you that the COAB has not looked at this issue. It should, and maybe we've been remiss, but we have not looked at that issue as to what would make sense. But I agree that it is, ultimately an issue. And this city has never disciplined, terminated an officer for the use of force that killed someone or for an in-custody death. They've disciplined for collateral policy violations, but not once have they terminated or disciplined an officer for using excessive force that resulted in a death. And I think that just speaks to the issue, and that is there's a problem with the process because clearly sometimes there should have been a termination for causing the death. The second point I would make is that I won't make it because I've forgotten it. But it'll come back. Go ahead, Katie.
Yeah, let's let Katie go, and then if it comes to you, you can take that. It's the middle button on the bottom.
I got it.
Yeah.
Does that work?
Great.
Hi. And like you were saying, the gentleman before me, I think part of the response to this was the fact that there was a lot of frustration and not any avenue to get that resolved. So of course frustration, like I think Mrs. Lubin said one time, that doesn't have any avenue will eventually lead to anger. And I do worry also, I don't know, it was a couple weeks ago when they had the article about how Cody Burney, an officer who shot Keaton Otis 11 times, has now been hired as a DA. And I don't even know how he possibly could be in a position to decide whether or not to charge a former coworker. And so, yeah, that is kind of worrisome that that they're hiring people who have killed on our mentally ill people early to do that and decide these kind of things. And I don't know. I have to think if they really cannot fire an officer for any misconduct, at some point, is there an HR documentation management process? Because I know even in government, if you go through certain steps, there are ways to terminate people. But I do worry there does not seem to be any accountability and means or ways to, I don't know, get that done. So, but yeah, after hearing about that story, I'm like, yeah, I do worry about that.
I mean, at some point, it's a health issue, right?
Right, it is.
That's what I hear you saying. But, I mean, it affects us all.
It does.
When you read the paper.
Yeah, and it just the level of trust even, and, you know, and I think just, yeah, a big part of the COAB and why things didn't maybe go right is lack of transparency. And I do have to say, abuse and corruption thrive in privacy and secrecy.
I completely agree, Katie.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Charles? You have to press.
Hello again, Charles Johnson. Philip had talked about the structure and report and what might happen in the presentation of that report. And occasionally in these chambers we hear laudatory talk about innovation, but I actually think that maybe it would be better to closely mirror this. It's about 11 pages of report from last year. Ends with a table. The one recommendation that leaps out at me at the beginning is that there be another table after the table that's already there, the acronym table. Because if you just go to page 11.
Wait a minute, what's this report?
Last year's, the 2015, the 11 pages, which is it's sandwiched in the middle, towards the beginning of the packet.
I have a copy of it right here. This is the status report.
Right behind the agenda. I don't know if your packages are different than ours. So like 2 pages after the agenda.
This is the table you're referring to?
Yeah. It starts with the MHCRS. And actually, I suppose, I don't know, I probably should be like footnoted towards the beginning, but that, you know, like the last page of the report, even though this is nominally for Judge Simon, you know, on the principle of that first word, and I don't know if it's in both of the C's or only your C, but community. Community will choke on if they just jumped to page 711, and in the second line, COAB, we all know what COAB means, COAB, COCO, DOJ. But then you start to get the COPS and MHCRS and DSUFCS, and they're probably, by parentheses, they're probably mentioned at the first time they're mentioned. That's bad practice. We're trying to eliminate bad practices. So I don't know if it's, in the Chicago style manual or an American AMA style manual, but whatever this Charles Johnson style dictation page says that every document produced by the government should end with a table of acronyms. That's not essential, but I think on the principle of best practices, you could adopt it. And then for Philip and
it would be like a glossary or an index or something like that at the
exactly. Thank you, Philip.
Maybe footnote would make it easier for the reader. Because I will note that on page 2, just to defend, right? Page 2, second paragraph, it's denoted in typical Chicago APA style. So, love it.
It takes turns. It's a smart microphone. It takes turns. It goes off and on. I don't know what depth of data and metrics you have access to. So one thing that maybe has helped preserve my sanity through this process is that, in my mind, the last police-inflicted fatality on in our community is Michael Johnson. It's a troubling, even though he is armed, it's a troubling one for me because it's a death in proximity to a hospital, which is not a new occurrence in our city. So, depending on what I didn't see very much referral to data, and I know technically your main issue is compliance, but I think that it would be beneficial for you to even just anecdotally or directly from Portland Cop Watch and from the officer involved shooting report, the OIS report, talk about just what you see. I have not actually thoroughly reviewed that data, and I don't think it's in your mandate, but I think that for you to engage with the community, we could all improve our literacy on who was shot, when were they shot, how many were shot. Unfortunately, it's a busy world, so fatal interactions with the police will stick on the top of our mind. But I think that is really, in the end, that's the only yardstick the community cares about, is reducing police harm. Your mandate, even though when DOJ originally came to town, there was concern about racism influencing practice in police, there's not a lot of tools at your disposal in the settlement agreement to address that, but you can at least talk about harm. And also, I think it would be very legitimate for cooperation with Cop Watch or your own review of the officer-involved shooting material to break out demographics. Technically, you're not supposed to care whether about anything except maybe the mental health condition of the victim of police violence. But I know you believe in transparency and facts available to the community, so it would be interesting to have demographic that talks about victims of police violence, and do we know anything about their mental health status, and then what do we know about their race, ethnicity, background, socioeconomic status. We can all be pretty sure they're in the bottom third.
Do you, in regards to mental health and intersectionality of those issues?
I think that's an awkward thing because different communities, there's always stigma around any type of mental health and developmental issue, and those are processed differently. But there's the fact that there is intersectionality is undeniable, but I think different communities have, even within the sub-communities, a spectrum of how they feel about, I don't like to speak about how even white gay males, understand mental health and what's stigmatic and what's not. Is it cool to say I have ADHD? That's the in diagnosis. I can confess to that. So it's difficult, but we know it's there. So definitely I think any insights that any COAB member has regarding intersectionality and shared trauma, shared symptomology, is something that a COAB member should feel free to suggest for inclusion in the report. Thanks, y'all.
Thank you. So far we've been hearing your comments, and I think what I'm hearing from everyone is we would like to talk about what we've done so far, what successes we've had, what recommendations we've made, that there haven't been any results from those efforts, and also what modifications we would like to see from the settlement agreement. made to the settlement agreement, and a glossary index for all the acronyms, and inform the judge that the city is not within compliance and how that's affected us, how that's affected our work, and that we feel that we are somewhat at an impasse right now because of the city's actions. And am I missing anything does anyone have anything else to add? I think so far we've had a good discussion. I think this is a good start. Did I see something?
Oh, okay. And then after Debbie's done, I'm going to ask a few points.
Sure, of course, please do.
Good to see you too. Debbie Iona. So besides, you guys have talked about some of the challenges that are facing you as a body, the fact that you have unfilled seats. Other things I feel like I've heard you talk about in the past too is maybe more staff support would be helpful for what you're doing. And I also think that there's really not a lot of clarity about what happens as far as can you renew your terms? How long are your terms? Those kinds of things I think would add a little bit more structure to what you're doing and have everybody know what's coming next. I also kind of want to go back to Tom's discussion about the police contract and how, you haven't been involved in it. And it looks as if possibly City Council is going to be voting on it within the next 2 or 3 weeks. So I feel like this is something you might want to share with the judge, a concern that there are these decisions being made that affect the community, but the community hasn't been involved in the discussions around, what's happening. And I talked not only with the police contract, there's also been all of the issues around the CRC. First they started off with the focus group that met behind closed doors, and then that led to the recommendation that the CRC and the Police Review Board kind of be merged and the hearings for appeals take place behind closed doors. And a lot of you came to the town hall they had on that. So that was dropped. And then the next thing that came out was going to do a lot of things, but one of them would be eliminate public comment at appeal hearings. Again, these things are kind of taking place sort of off on the side, and then they get presented to the public, but the public wasn't really involved in developing the proposals. And I think that those kinds of things I think might be worth explaining to him, because in some cases they've been using the city's been using concern about being out of compliance with the settlement agreement as the rationale behind, rushing these decisions through. And I'm thinking about particularly ones related to the CRC and speeding up appeal hearings. That's, they're saying we're afraid we're going to be out of compliance with the settlement agreement. That's why we have to hurry up and change the ordinance before the court date. And those are just some concerns I know I have, and I think maybe sharing those with the judge might be helpful.
Well, I think, frankly, the city not involving the COAB, they have these work groups, and we're not involved, and we're supposed to be under the settlement agreement, sort of the clearinghouse for the community right now as to what they're doing in those areas. And they exclude us from the meetings. They don't seek our input, and they go on their merry way. I mean, I don't get it. I think it's non-compliance with the agreement every time they do this. Yeah.
And to me, those are things that would be worth sharing with the judge. So it kind of gets the lay of the land from your perspective, and you would be channeling the community's perspective too. Because we can't, from what I understand, we can't send letters in to the judge. We're not a party to the deal. And so, we're kind of counting on you to articulate a lot of these things.
Oh, wait, I have a question.
Thank you.
So just to be clear, and if it's wrong, just let me know. So just to give a synopsis, so city uses out of compliance rationale according to the city's own status quo needs. Would that be more or less appropriate?
Well, I guess how I would describe it is I mean, it's quite possible this could be very genuine concern on their part, but what we're hearing anyway is we have to hurry up and make these changes to the way CRC operates, because if we don't, we'll be out of compliance with the settlement agreement. So then it feels like they need to hurry up and do it, which means that then it's difficult to include the public in forming the policy recommendations. And I've heard that, at the hearing a couple weeks ago on this, members of the community recommended forming a task force to look at some of these things. And the mayor and council members seemed receptive to that. And we're hearing that maybe I hear that it sounds like they might do that, but it will be one meeting. And so it just doesn't feel like that's enough to really be able to, this is a big complicated system.
Absolutely.
And really besides for example, what was in this 2010 stakeholder report, there were a bunch of recommendations, going through those, but then we have the accountability subcommittee's recommendation. All of those things should be talked about in a deliberative way.
Yeah.
I don't think you can do it in one meeting.
No, I don't think so either.
Oh.
Must be a very, very long.
Right. Yeah, so, okay, thanks.
Yeah, for those of you who don't know, the Accountability Subcommittee in the COAB spent roughly 6 months listening to city officials, listening to the public, researching best practices, and coming up with 44 approved and a couple of pending recommendations as to accountability, including changes in the IPR, changes in the CRC, creation of a police auditor, an expansive, comprehensive approach to police accountability that would extend way beyond the COAB. I mean, we're short-termers. And because we can't meet, we can't approve those recommendations. They have been presented to the city council. The city council is aware of them. But Debbie's right. I mean, these are not simple issues, and they take work, and we have spent, whether we're right or not, we've spent a great deal of time and involved a lot of people, and the city ignores us. So, and I say us, I mean, it ignores the community's view on what a police hopefully, I mean, I agree. Those are things that we want to include in the report to the judge.
B.
So I want to be clear then. We're going to include those recommendations in the status. I would also like to, for all the hours that were involved in creating that through the different work groups and the community, it would be nice to have some sort of legacy value for those. So I would like to see some sort of recommendation for whatever sort of COAB arrangement is formulated by the city going forward, that those recommendations come to their attention, regardless of what the quote-unquote new COAB structure may or may not look like. I think that is important, and personally, it just sort of makes me feel like I did my job, as a community representative, and all the hours I spent besides that. If that's cool with you guys.
Yeah.
And if the community doesn't have any objection to that.
I'm wondering the COAB team perspective. In the report, should we include community concerns and COAB concerns? I'm feeling that we've been cheated by the city, that we've been doing all of this work and been completely unpaid. Is that something that we should add to the report? Because we've been working diligently this whole time. We've had no pay. They've been ignoring us as we've been doing this work. So we could explain to the judge how that impacts the community as well. I don't know. I'm just putting it out there to the COAB team. What are your thoughts on that particular issue about not having a stipend?
Well,
I don't know.
I like your idea of the COAB hasn't gotten much love. I wouldn't say cheated, but yeah, it'd be nice to get a little bit more love from the people that are organizing and have the power. And I mean, I'm kind of teasing, but I'm kind of being honest too. I spent a lot of time, and I've spent a lot of time, and I know that you all have spent even more time than I have. I don't know. Yeah, I do. I do like that idea.
Okay.
I don't like the. I don't go for the cheat part. I go
That's
for the.
fine.
I go
Okay,
for the
I take
love
it back.
part. Okay.
Not that cheating and infidelity have ever led to divorce. I have to side with Tom that there has been a substantial infidelity to the agreement, and that there's good cause for the COAB divorce to proceed.
Here we go, talking about marriage and the rest of this.
What the family dynamic that, and I want to. The reason I came up to the microphone.
Well, yeah, and the city requested a divorce. So, I mean, we requested a severing of ties, but the city wanted a divorce. They used the word divorce. So, there you have it. I didn't think we were married to the city. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Not at all. Be sure you get your marital assets. Fair distribution of marital assets.
Brevity is healthy. All right.
Be sure.
There was a marital agreement, right? Did we sign anything like that? A prenup?
And you need to get your hands on some of those marital assets. And I have to say, it's a very minor issue, but there is a financial and fiduciary aspect to the funding of the COAB COCO work. And somebody got over $100,000. Well, I don't know if they served for a full year, so I don't know if they got over $100,000. But that's also of concern to poor communities. Even if a person of minority background wins a paycheck that's bigger than the governor of the state of Oregon, and then that organization becomes dysfunctional, and there's infidelity to its principles, and there's divorce, that's still going to be in the community conversation. And totally unrelated to that, at the City Club, I happened to speak with Kathleen Sadat. And, I think that when we talk about the family dynamic of COAB, we had our own concerns with our own struggles with perceptions of racism and prejudice. And it's too bad that our city did not have a better context for those things to work out. Even yesterday, right here in those chambers, while we were here, which is why I originally came up to mention that, I was very grateful that I think it was Debbie Iona from the League of Women Voters was just up here. And Tom Steenson was here as a testifier on the behind closed doors union contract. And really, we were so focused on outrage about the $6 million in the behind closed doorness that we never really got a lot of meat, I think, about what's in the contract that enhanced reducing harm from police officers and holding police officers accountable for harm inflicted. So I think that possibly it would be appropriate for the all 8 existing COAB members to communicate in whatever ways you feel you're legally allowed. My personal, not quite professional legal opinion is there are 0 constraints. I don't know if you have contradictory belief actually in written letters from the city attorney's office, but the community believes that you're authorized to communicate, especially since you don't have any, you have nothing financially. So, there's no reason why all 8 COAB members shouldn't feel free to have multi-party phone calls and everything back and forth, so that on the 12th, when this thing comes up, you can, as many people want to come, and actually what should happen is, especially, there's none of you left appointed by commissioners. Oh, that's right, and your commissioner is the only one that's sitting in the back row. And perhaps, And I would, you know, indirectly, while I'm not turning around to talk to her directly, ask that it might be appropriate for the COAB and to be on the agenda prior to the settlement status conference meeting, perhaps simultaneous with. Yeah, well, that would be to me. That would be. I think the 12th is Wednesday and the 13th is Thursday, if I remember right. But, so a great. That's okay because delaying.
I thought
tactics,
it was October 20th.
It might have been moved back. Not Yom Kippur, the settlement, the contract.
Oh. Okay. Yep.
So, but the main thing is I just wanted to echo the settlements because it was even before Debbie Iona from LWV came up. Mike Sherman from Cop Watch said a lot about the police contract, and you know, contextually, if you look at the struggle of the people of Portland to have the highest quality policing, the cop-out, for lack of a better phrase, is always, well, the contract. So, you know, I cannot help but say that it is Machiavellian of the mayor to put forth a 3-year contract during his lame duckery. It's improper and immoral for the commissioners who will be appointing the 4 other people and for Commissioner Fritz to vote for a 3-year contract negotiated secretly by a lame duck mayor, knowing that the majority, that all that contract period would be handcuffing Ted Wheeler. And the community, you know, made that pretty clear yesterday. But I think that that's an excellent point of intersection for the COAB to re-engage with the community and get on track with the idea of community oversight of the settlement agreement and engagement. You know, I'm a very broad view person. I think the COAB can meddle in and speak in everything related to law enforcement. It's okay that some of you have a finer focus than that. But I think that this is the key opportunity for y'all to look at, as Mike didn't know, there were a few copies, hard copies of the settlement or the contract, and you know, you've already mentioned that your recommendations, neither party to the agreement that gave birth to y'all, you know, you're like the orphan. We talked about divorce, but you're also the orphan child. You've been pushed off to the orphanage, you know, eventually those children need to learn to advocate for themselves and should also be provided with services to help them become fully functional, regardless of the dysfunction of their parents, the Department of Justice, and the city. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, one more person, and then we'll go back to COAB discussion, and we'll do a break for a few minutes, and we'll come back for more discussion. During that break, I'd like to give the community an opportunity to read the letter, get some snacks, and then come back. Does that sound okay? Go ahead, Deborah.
I'm Deborah Harris. I don't have very much to say, but I recall someone asked Walt Disney, how do you make the magic? He says, there is no magic. It's in the details. And how are we going to make the magic? One of the key factors to getting something accomplished is that everyone has to be on board, and we have to be able to communicate and create that dialogue among each other. If we don't do that, then we cannot go forward. I just put down a few notes here. It's difficult, regardless to how simplified it is. It's difficult for people to embrace or support change. I was born in Arkansas, a small town, went through a lot. And I saw how difficult it is for people to support and embrace change. So we need to find a way to get people to listen and learn. Everything everyone has said has been awesome. You know, COAB, you've done an excellent job. All your hard time, your hard work that you put into it. But in order for the community, we're saying, well, the community, we're representing the community, which we are. In different meetings we've gone, whether it's been here or whether it's been in the heart of the community, we're not getting the crux of the community to come there. Why? When people began to see that nothing is being accomplished, even though we know something's been accomplished, they tend to back out and say that's fatalism. Fatalism, that's just the way it is. But this doesn't have to be fatalism. So in order for us to move forward, and we were going great at one point when there was a breakdown. When there's a breakdown, then we need to come together and see. Sometimes each party may just have to give a little. And, put the pride aside and give a little, because what we're trying to achieve is very important. And we can't achieve it if we go in different directions. And in closing, we want the community to be involved. We want to reach out. We want to see that we are making steps and taking steps to make things better. The police officers, the leaders, the mayor, the governors, COAB. We want to make sure everybody is buying in on what we're trying to accomplish, is buying in on the goal. So in order, I know we're putting a report together, which is great, but I just want to emphasize the importance is pulling together and seeing how we can work together as a team, pressing forward. And in closing, in these few words, press forward without being pushy. Walk, and I'm not speaking to COAB, this is general for all of us. Let's see how we can press forward without being pushy, walk in dominion without dominating, and being strategic without being manipulative. If we can do these things and reach out and pull ourselves together and sometimes give in a little, not saying COAB, I'm not speaking on either side, give in and say, what can we do to work together? And then when there's disruption that comes in, from each end, we want to say, this isn't accepted. Because disruption comes in, it could be someone paid to do it because they don't want to see things go forward. It could be someone with a situation that they cannot avoid or help from creating these issues. But let's move forward and let's think about what can we do to create a collaborative working relationship, and then we can move forward in accomplishing the goal. Thank you.
Well, wait 1 second. I'd like to respond to your comment, and thank you so much for sharing. And I agree, in any real world, in any group, doing group work, if there's a crash and burn that happens, it's not necessarily a negative thing that takes place, but it's an opportunity to regroup or to find a new way and take off from there. And that's, I think, what we're doing now. We're trying to regroup together. And I think in order for us to take off, we really need a different strategic direction. Thus far, the way we've been going has not worked, and we need a plan. We've planned for the settlement agreement modifications, and we'd like for those changes to take place for us to move forward. So I really, your comment gave me a lot to think about, so thank you so much for that. So before we report to Judge Simon, we need to meet one more time to review our draft. What do you think about that, having a second meeting? I mean, maybe October 5th or October 10th or something about having a second meeting where we can come with a pre-written rough draft, have community members available to read that and do some cleanup on it, and then have it ready and prepared for the presentation. I'm just putting the idea out there. We can mull on it. You don't have to give an answer now.
No, I like it. I just have to look at my calendar.
Dan?
October 5th would be the day both of the Human Rights Commission and Citizen Union after the meet also.
Do you know what day that is?
Okay, I was coming up with an example for a day. That's good to be aware of. I will put that down. Are you ready for a 10-minute break?
Oh, no, I just wanted to say real quick that I really like what Deborah said, especially with there is no magic. It's in the details. It really is. I think that the conflict that has happened and will continue to happen in the future in these sorts of meetings really requires a board to be resilient, and there needs to be training around that. And I also think there needs to be, and this is just my idea, not only a response team, but sort of an aftercare team, so that when somebody who has been, ritually marginalized throughout their lives, either institutionally or structurally or personally, is triggered, that there are mechanisms, very specific mechanisms, that allow for the care of that human being. So, and that means dialogue, caring dialogue, grounded in a sense of community. That's just me. So.
Perfect. Okay, so before we do a 10-minute break, I'd like to ask, Mandy, did you get any texts from Mariah, excuse the interpreter. Thank you. Okay, so right now it's 7:16. Why don't we come back at about 7:30? Get a chance to use the restroom, go outside to have a smoke, get some snacks, chat. I encourage you to all dialogue with each other. All right?
Hello, thank you for coming back. We're going to get started again at 7:38. We have an hour left before the end of this meeting. Of course, if we need more time, that's open for discussion, but right now we're getting back at it. So Dan has the floor, I believe. Dan? Welcome back.
Thank you, Chair Wolf. I had a couple of things to say, and Charles actually touched on one of them when he came up here about you presenting something to council, and he think he was trying to get you to testify about the contract, the PBA contract, which I agree would be a good thing. And I think who he's saying is that you as individuals can, I think some of you might have already testified. Tom Steenson testified, and I think Dr. Silver wrote a letter. So I think that's it's okay, but you can still write a letter.
Yes, I testified yesterday.
They haven't voted on it yet. But my point was that the COAB is not required under the ordinance to give reports to council of any kind, but I think it would be a good idea to either ask for that to be added or for it just to be done as a matter of common sense, that after you put out your response to the COCL, that you come in here and tell them what you thought. And one of the reasons for that, for instance, is, and this is something I want you to put in your report to the Judge Simon, that last time you said, here are the paragraphs where we disagree with your ratings. And their response to you was, you weren't specific about why you didn't like those ratings. Now, they work with you. They're the chair of this body, and they have your phone numbers and your emails. They could easily have said, can you please explain to us what's wrong with these paragraphs? And they didn't do that, which is just outrageous. So it might be worthwhile listing those specific reasons that those paragraphs should have been changed in the report to Judge Simon so that he understands. And maybe to also make the point that I just made, that we don't know why the COCL didn't talk to us. Want to turn your mic?
Thank you. Dan, can you help me out here? Which paragraphs are you talking about? Which report are you talking? I'm just landing here, so can you?
It was in the response to the report, the semi-annual report from the COCL. You all put forward your recommendations back to them and said, these are the paragraphs we disagree with your ratings. The other thing is that I was thinking, well, for one thing, too, is that the compliance officer is probably only probably going to be called a compliance officer, and we've been calling it COCL instead of COCO this whole time because it stands for something, and people don't know that when you use a. We're not probably going to say CO or C, so we're going to say CO. So get used to it because it'll probably just be the CO. Anyway, that the court-appointed monitor, while I understand why you asked for that collectively as a group, ultimately, that court-appointed monitor would be reporting back to the judge and or, at best, to the DOJ. The COCL, as weak as this is, considering who the defendant is in the lawsuit, is reporting back to the city who, in theory, responds to the demands of its community that puts it in power, that votes them into place. We don't really have a way as a community to talk to Judge Simon in the way that I think we'd like to, and we don't really have a way as a community to talk to the DOJ or get them to do anything. And that's one of the reasons Portland Cop Watch was very worried about the DOJ coming into town in the first place, was because we would lose local control over the ability to change our police. Now, ultimately, the DOJ is going to decide if the city's in compliance or not. So we already lost that to some extent, but that's why we don't want to lose your voice if we get a court-appointed monitor in. So if you can figure out a way to do that where the court-appointed monitor has to listen to the community, not just has a community board that buzzes around its ear, then we'd probably be more accepting of that idea.
Thank you. Any more comments?
I just want to be clear, Dan, that I heard you and understood you. So Portland Cop Watch would be amenable to a court-appointed monitor if they had an avenue or a pathway to have dialogue with the court-appointed monitor. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
That's what I meant. That's what they was. How do you see that influence working? How do you see that influence having an impact sufficient enough, right?
I would suggest all you could do would be to require the court-appointed monitor to consider, the COAB's input. I don't know what more you can do than that.
Right. Well, you could have it under a specific lens. To consider it under a specific lens. Does that make sense? Yes.
I think that to the issue of the possibility of a court-appointed monitor, I think individually the COAB members might want to look into. I'm not familiar with any of the particular implementations, be it Seattle or other cities, but since we have this foundation of a higher level of community engagement, I think we have to pressure the parties, which are the only, but really from both sides, both the DOJ and the city, that a court-appointed monitor could do some kind. I don't know how often. I think one thing we would like to know, for all our benefit, is how often do court-appointed monitors engage with the court? Is it scheduled, or is it ad hoc, PRN type thing? And then, I think the best vision for Portland would be that there would be periodic public, preferentially in chambers, in federal court chambers, interaction. I can't see us squeezing that out of the parties, except maybe it could be part 10 and a half. Ted Wheeler, incoming mayor, if this lame duck period ever ends, has a 10-point plan for police reform. I don't know where to find it on the internet, but arguably he could be amenable. There could be some discussion maybe with him before he takes office, even to see what his vision is for how, as mayor, he has mixed duties about minimizing financial liability, actual damage, and stuff like that. But in a perfect world, he would come on board with the idea of transparency and the city actually consenting or collaborating, stipulating with the DOJ that a court-appointed monitor is good, and the court-appointed monitor, what we would like is at the annual status to have quarterly, or right now we have semi-annual COAB, which the COAB, according to Dan, will just become the CO report. So maybe at the time of that report, the court-appointed monitor should be involved. Thanks, y'all.
Thank you. Yeah.
Pat Adams again. Philip, I'd like to respond to your question about strategy. And it seems to me that one of the things that is happening here is we're all talking about power, all right? Who's got the leverage? Who's got the effectiveness to get the other guy to do what we want? And that conflict is one way, and the never stop hammering against that is certainly one way. But it seems that we might have open another avenue as well. Our conflict with the police, and we seem to be, to me, oftentimes saying, what are they doing wrong? They need to be doing this, they need to be doing that. And of course, we're sitting here saying this, and I think the community looks at us and saying, hey, you're just like everybody else. You're saying all this great stuff, and nobody's listening. You're doing all this great work, and nothing's happening. So, and I think that as this board, we don't have that many cards, right, in this game. We got like 3 cards. These guys have been in this game for a long time. They're going to be in it for a long time. We need to get the best dang cards we can, and probably force and power. They're used to waiting us out. You know what I mean? They've waited everybody out. They can wait us out. So it comes to me that another avenue might be to say, what is it that we can offer the police, either the officers or the higher ups? What do they want that we want? All right, and one of the things that they want and we want is safety. And I think that citizen safety and police safety are not at odds. And that perhaps is a discussion that we can have maybe at the officer level. I don't know, but at least if we have some effort there. Because if we once get the community to see that we have a relationship with the police, that we are actively in dialogue, that we are actively caring about each other, that we are actively soliciting a way forward, then that could give us the kind of credibility that would help us everywhere.
Thank you. We'll take that under consideration. Because of time, and we'll be ending, I'm wondering if we should discuss having a second work session, potentially October 13th on Thursday. Would everyone be available on October 13th? That's 2 weeks. We would come, and with the goal in mind that we would be ready with a draft to present to you that you could review, provide your feedback on. We do a final cleanup on it and have it ready to report. So what are the thoughts on October 13th?
Are you
Yes, same time, same place.
It's fine with me.
Andy said we have to confirm. Okay.
Well,
Just, I think you should go ahead and talk and plan your meeting. I just want to be clear, and I'm happy to do this for you. If we want to use city resources, I need to check back in with the city to make sure we can do that. So that is just a thing I want people to be aware of.
Okay. B? Did you say something? Oh, okay. All right. And we'll have to talk with the city and see if we can get that worked out, and we can make an announcement on that. Yeah. Did you have something to say?
While you guys are making your schedule, I just have a final thought that I would like. Hi, I'm Linda.
Hi.
For the judge to hear. While you guys have been on hiatus, I've been hard at work helping support the Homeless Bill Rights Act that helps to decriminalize the very survival things that we all do, just sleep, eat, stand in one spot, rest, police call it loitering. We're trying to get these bills passed to help protect. So I understand there's different levels to kind of combat this, but I would like for the judge to know that there's still rampant use of force, that it doesn't seem to the community that it's being addressed. It doesn't seem to the community that there's being any repurposed training for officers that are the aggressors of the force, and that we would like to know who's receiving this extra training if they are using force. If you want to know more about the bill that we're working on last session, it was SB 629. And, the work is coming along. We did, why we went to registration last week, the week prior, we did gain a champion, an ex-sheriff, chief police, Pelosi, I think is how it's enunciated. But the work is still vital, but we have to realize that the marginalized individuals that are the brunt end of the use of force are our most marginalized individuals, which are impoverished people, houseless people, people of color, LGBTQ. I just want the judge to know that there are other avenues that we are all diligently working at to put a dent in this, and I really would like to see that the judge hear that there really is a desperate need to repurpose some of these officers, because we don't feel like that all the officers are the ones out hurting everyone.
I have a question. What do you mean by repurpose? Can you explain that a little bit more for me? Pretend like I don't know, because I don't. So, could you educate me, please?
So, my husband's a plumber, so I'll go the easiest route I know for purpose. Waste pipes in our bathroom, they tend to break down because of the waste and water and so when that happens, it's really, it gets clearer and it gets clearer. You have to use it. You know, with another one, I'll repurpose it. Right, repurpose it for creating a new path for creating a new path for the actual work. But when you repurpose something, sometimes it can look the same as doing a job. Like, you take the whole thing out and make the sprinkler system outside. Just give it another thing to do it first, right? So, and I feel like it officers need to be first. Some of the behaviors definitely hot.
Mic's off.
some of behaviors are taught, and we have to help teach them, is what I'm saying. That's all. Thank you. Thank you guys for your hard work.
Thank you. Any more discussion from COAB members?
I just have one comment. I remembered my second point. Mike had made a comment about disruptions at COAB meetings and how they interfered with our ability to get our business done. I'm paraphrasing, but what I would like to say is this. I chaired or facilitated subcommittee meetings with many of, and sometimes the identical group of people that have been alleged to have been the disruptors at the full COAB meetings. And it wasn't necessarily easy to chair or facilitate those meetings because people had strong voices and they had comments and they sometimes talked over people and sometimes didn't respect people. That's all true. But we got through those meetings and they were productive. It took some patience. And I'm sure some people were offended by the nature of the comments, but we got work done. And I frankly think a very, very large part of why the full COAB meetings sometimes disintegrated had to do with the fact that we were chaired, still are chaired technically, by the COCO. And I don't know of any other board or organization that is chaired ever by someone from the outside. In other words, the organization always chooses its own chair. And I think the dynamics, not necessarily intentionally, but certainly proven to be true over time, were that was a very, very bad arrangement, having the COCO chair the COAB. And you can ascribe motivations or not to why all that happened, but putting that aside, I think that the experience that we had at the subcommittee meeting level, and take tonight for an example, I think that the COAB and the community are quite capable of interacting and getting along and having meetings, and doesn't mean there aren't going to be difficulties and some disruptions, but I think that much was made out of all that. Much ado. And that to the extent that the DOJ or the city or anyone else is using that as an excuse not to fill vacancies, not to meet with us, and not to allow us to do our work, I think is a very, very misplaced notion. Because I think that, the people in the COAB are people from the community, just like the people from the community who show up at the meetings are from the community, and we're capable of getting along. It won't be perfect, but, and it has been a very sad episode, I think, to watch all that happen when it could have been avoided by having a different chair or having a chair who was more respectful and understanding of people, sometimes people suffering with mental illness and sometimes people who may have had an agenda. But I think that's important to say. I think we can all get along and have meetings and work and make decisions and
Yeah, and I'd like to add, just for clarification for the group, because some people might be unaware of what happened. So under the settlement agreement, it clearly stated that the COCO is required to have collaboration with COAB and with the executive committee chair. Before COCO took over the meeting, the chair of the executive committee would review the agenda, offer feedback, so on and so forth. But they didn't do that. They didn't have collaboration, and they weren't following what was stated there. I ended up getting in contact with them as the meeting was coming up close, and I said that they really needed to have this collaboration before the meeting happened and review that. And they set up the meeting. They wanted to have 2 separate rooms for the public and for us. And I said, no, we really needed to have one room. And they said it was going to go completely awry. So we got into a huge heated argument about it. They were very stubborn. And then 1 week before the meeting, I told the COAB members, COAB team, what had happened. And there was an outcry, emails of complaints saying that we should be held in one room. I sent that and emailed and kept in contact. And up until the day before the meeting, they had finally approved that we would be in one room. And they had it all set up. I helped to set it up to make sure that we didn't feel as an us versus them situation. So we wanted to have it all very smoothly set up and worked out, and it ran fine. It ran fine, and I think that was proof. That was proof that that's the issue, and they are the issue. And I resent. I mean, I don't resent the. I don't believe that it's the community that's causing the disruption. I feel that it's not fair to say that. I've noticed that Cocal has a lack of empathy. And that's fine. There's different skill sets, different experiences, different perspectives. That's all okay. But for the city to say that we are not able to run ourselves, that's when I have a problem. And tonight, again, we're running fine and very smoothly. So that's what I'd like to clarify about what happened. I was very, I told them, and I tried to use the power that I had. But anytime there was a chair, the chair has the power, and the chair can delegate that power if they want to. But that's never anything that they wanted to do, to delegate that power to us. So I guess, let me check what time we're at right now. Got about 25 minutes left. What else is out there? Yes, Pat, please.
Well, sorry, it comes to me, this is with all due respect and appreciation of all the work there, and I can't quite get over this, and that is, after all this, we got 2 white guys sitting up there running the meeting, and that kind of bothers me.
They just look like they're It's really me. They just look like
Well, in response to that, I do have a comment. Not the full COAB members could come. Not all of the COAB members could come tonight. So what's left is the 4 of us. And that's what happened. And yes, we do happen to be white. I understand. And I thank you for acknowledging that. Yesterday in front of City Hall, in front of the mayor, I saw a lot of the all white commissioners and the white mayor, and there was 1 woman and 4 men on council. So I appreciate you for calling that out, and it's definitely something to consider.
I would say, without naming names, that there are people in the COAB and people that have left the COAB who are not white, who made a decision that this was a colossal waste of time, that this wasn't going anywhere, the COAB's being used, it's a facade, you know, it's a scam, and I don't necessarily disagree with their thinking. They may well be right. And the way the city is dealing with us would suggest they're right. Whether that adds to the question of race, I don't know. I think that there may be people a lot smarter than me who aren't here tonight because of those kinds of reasons.
And I'm just going to make the point all the more reason, Pat, that we need to keep coming back. And we need to keep asking all the right kinds of people that are being affected to come back to the table. But we have to stay here at the table and make the table. We have to set the table so that we can invite them, right? We have to provide that bridge. We do. It's incumbent upon us. Thank you for saying that.
Thank you, V. Charles?
Thank you, Charles. Oh,
Your mic.
On it comes. So, in order to prevent crime and reduce work for the police, behind you white guys there, they've taken away the name tags for the city commissioners. And what I was really thinking of is the president of the council. In city government, the presiding officer of the council, even though we act like the mayor runs things, the presiding officer of the city council rotates. So as you look towards new COAB structures and increasing diverse representation in the COAB, even though there needs to be a central administrative authority, or not, and let's not say administrative authority, somebody who has the greatest familiarity with the paperwork and the bureaucracy, you can still have very short terms for the chair of the COAB or develop a rotational presiding officer structure.
Which is something I suggested.
Yeah, that's right.
Every 6 months.
Yeah.
Switch it out.
That is the exact timeline that, I don't know if Amanda Fritz is still with us, but she'll get to be president someday. If she, and she probably has, as long as she's been up there. She should have had a couple of 6-month terms as president. So, yes. Which raises a question about discipline and arrests and the rules at city council, but we'll get into that another time. And so just...
yeah, just remember, yeah, Kokol was presided over COAB.
Again,
until we finally disengaged from them. And yes, but we agree. But until the ties are severed, we've got to make those modifications to make that happen.
And definitely that's something, something to put on the plate after you dispense with the report to Judge Simon and stuff like that. But once the Human Rights Commission gets their second meeting under their belt, and once we interface with PCOD to find out what's going on there, so that you have a quorum for November, and that you have to start meeting again because the judge will be pissed. So in November, we need to be prepared for that dialogue of how is everybody going to feel adequately supported to be the presiding officer. It's been a little while since I spoke with Lakita Lanford. I don't think she's resigned yet. She's still committed COAB member.
Yes.
So yeah,
internally, it's important.
She just couldn't come tonight.
For y'all to have discussions about what everybody on the COAB feels would be helpful for them to function as an ideal presiding officer. Thanks, y'all.
Thank you. Okay, honestly, I have one comment. This is not Philip as chair, just me representing me. In a perfect world, I would love to see happen is for me to chair the COAB, and then I could make $150,000 a year because I would love that income, and then I would dole it out to each member and not keep all of it for myself, but dole it out to every member, maybe 50,000 to you, 30,000 really, depending on the number of people on the team. But that is really, I think that would be a great fit. I'm just saying. I mean,
Well, since we're now talking about redesigning the COAB, you have had a couple of meetings with a professional facilitator, and I didn't think those went particularly badly. I think, especially after observing the Citizen Review Committee for many years, where they're trying really hard to focus on the case that's before them and everything else, and a lot of times they forget their own protocols. And I ended up shouting it from the audience, and they got mad at me. They said, "Why are we hearing about our protocols from Cop Watch?" It's because nobody from the city is doing it for them, and nobody from their own group is doing it for them. So I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing because not everybody has the skills to chair meetings. So it's not necessarily bad if the chairperson is not also the one that runs the meeting. So that's just something to keep in mind too. It was mentioned before that you should make sure that whatever new people come on, because the terms are over in January. I don't know how you decide who's going to keep going. That whoever comes on understands those recommendations you already made, and that those need to continue to be pushed. And that's one of the reasons I'm encouraging you to include those recommendations in their total in your report to Judge Simon. And lastly, I don't know who put together this last sheet of the packet we got tonight about the attrition of COAB members. It's dated today. Have anybody seen it?
Yeah.
Okay. So it says that there was no reason given for Sharon Maxwell's resignation, and she wrote an extensive letter. Oh.
And so did email, right? So I don't know who's.
I could take responsibility for that. Although they had wonderful or insightful observations about problems, I didn't actually see it definitively as a reason for them leaving. That's why I did that. But
so you put this together?
I did, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think it'd be a little more helpful to give a couple more, because even though Dr. Moreland Compua didn't give her reason, she was appointed to the PDC. So she couldn't sit on both boards at once. So, I mean, even if that wasn't given as a reason, she left to go to another board. And my recollection of what Sharon Maxwell's letter said is that she felt like the system was set up to fail. And he may have been prescient in that.
Yeah.
My mic back on. Yeah, she may have been prescient in that. And then other people had somebody, right. Well, you got Christy Jameson resigned from the PCOD. But that same thing happened with Siadam. Right, she resigned.
Well,
for
no,
personal
I'd
reasons.
like to, I'm going to interrupt. I apologize. You said Christy resigned?
She resigned
She
from
resigned
the
here because
PCOD.
she resigned from PCOD?
Yeah. And then
Okay, so there was no clear due process for that specific situation because they told her that she had to resign because, I mean, she didn't want to resign, but because of the process, it was really muddled.
I completely agree with you. I think it was very wrong-headed to take somebody who'd been trained and understood what this board was about and say you can't serve on it anymore just because you're not a member of this other board. I think she should have been asked just to keep reporting back to PCOD. But that's another. But Siadam had the same thing happen. So she resigned from the HRC, and then she couldn't be part of this board. So maybe we can talk more about cleaning this sheet up. But I think it's helpful to have that record as clear as possible.
Thank you, Dan. Yeah, and I agree. That's a good point. The judge, for a clearer picture, for the judge to be able to see that, and if there was a pattern, I think that's right. It would show a clearer picture of what was happening. Really, we could do a brief summary of the reasons everyone resigned. We can figure something out. Was there... What's going on?
I was thanking Tom for his work.
Oh. No, I thought you were having a party happening over there. I just wanted to join. Huh. Okay. Oh, yeah, Mandy.
I just wanted to bring up briefly that obviously the report will be compiled, and I am here to help do that stuff. We might want to have a brief conversation before we leave, just of how you all how you're splitting up the writing, or how you want to get it to me, or if you want to tell me anything right now about what you want me to do, we can talk about it now.
I've done collaborative processes before, and I guess I want to give enough respect to the people who've done the majority of the work, Philip and Tom, Rochelle, and I'm willing to write my part and then submit it to you all, and then you all edit it into into the big document the way you see fit, the way you believe is going to create the easiest
I
accessibility.
think what Mandy means is for tonight, for typing out what we discussed tonight, we can ask Mandy what we want to prefer from that, what we would like to review. Is that what you were getting at, Mandy?
I don't mean to make this complicated. This could be a very simple process. I'm talking about actually compiling the written report you'll give to Judge Simon that you'll submit, because you'll have multiple authors.
Oh.
Yeah, like how you want to get that to me. Anything you want to talk about now.
Thank you. Okay, thank you for if we having that help if we need it. Thank you.
I know that Tom has been working on some stuff on the document. So my preference would be to write what I want to write and then submit that to Tom, since he already has the body of it, if I'm understanding correctly. Tom, correct me if I'm wrong. And then you can put that where you see fit, where it's going to make most sense in terms of readability for the judge or his clerks or whatever.
I think it would be a good idea to see what is already written, and maybe it covers part of what you want to say, so you're not doing work that you don't need to do. And then you can fill in with what you want to say from what is there or isn't.
Michelle, your mic.
Sorry.
Yeah, the audio.
Okay,
yeah.
I'm just suggesting that we all look at what's written so far before we move on. The other thing, I'm not sure that we decided who exactly will be the presenter of this information at the hearing, which is on the agenda.
Yes. Like I said before, I'm open. I discussed I could do an opening and Tom could close, or I could do the whole presentation, or Tom could do the whole presentation. But the settlement agreement does state that the chair of the executive committee reports, but I am flexible. I was thinking it would be, I've been involved with COAB since the inception. I also am deaf. I think it would make for a strong point and a strong presentation, but I am open to suggestions and I'm very flexible. So, thoughts?
I appreciate, again, Philip, your leadership's awesome. I've always known that, though. So,
thank you.
I agree. I would really like to see Philip speak. I don't know if it works best in terms of impact at the beginning or at the end. At the same time, I'd like Tom included in that conversation, if you'd be so gracious, right? That's very gracious of you to share that influence, and I think it would be good for the community too.
Like I said, I'm completely open. So
I like the balance of it too.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Sure, definitely. I think so. I could see. I want this to be powerful, and I want to really get the message across. And how we do that and who does that, I don't care. But I just want someone who's going to be able to deliver a powerful message. Could be me, could be Tom, could be Rochelle, could be you.
It would not be me.
Tom,
really
does that
like
work for you to share the presentation?
What did you just say, Rochelle?
I asked if it works for Tom to share the presentation with Philip.
Of course. Technically, says one voting member of the COAB will present. I would assume he would allow some latitude.
Okay, but we're not even meeting, so we're not really voting members. We've only been, I mean, I know this might be, yeah, okay.
Hi, Linda, again, just a suggestion. If you break up the presentation, maybe Philip could have a community member also point out things. Maybe we could have somebody that's an officer help out or have somebody that has experienced some issues with officers maybe help make the presentation. Just plus Philip as well. I realize he's got impact too. But
No, I just wanted to make the point that Philip has suffered at the hands of PPP.
I'm aware of that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
But so maybe just so that Philip doesn't have to bear the whole brunt of it, so that there still encompasses more community as well. Suggestion.
I don't feel overburdened by that. I feel like it's my duty, and I'm happy to do it. But again, it's not my decision. I want it to be a group consensus. So thank you for your feedback, and we'll talk about it. And we don't have to decide right now. We could discuss it more in depth on October 13th if we would like to do that.
I'm in consensus to have Philip and Tom
Okay.
communicate the status report. Now, have we decided on how we're going to? We can just email each other, right? And then we'll come up with an overall draft. And then, Tom, are you going to email it to Mandy so then it can go up on the website? And then if the community wants to input that way, then they would be able to. And we can bring in that draft into the October 13th meeting. Is that right?
I'll do my best to get it out to people on the COAB and get it posted before that next meeting as best we can. And yeah, we'll just do our best.
Yeah, and if we get down to the wire, then we can. If it gets down to the wire, then I will poke you in the ribs, give you a little nudge, and you'll get it out. I was just teasing. Anyway, thank you for coming to tonight's meeting, and thank you to the city for providing resources to make this happen. And I feel tonight was a good, solid, healthy discussion, and I'm looking forward to more collaborative work together and putting together an expansive report, and we'll be in touch, and everyone have a nice evening. Thank you for coming.